Hey Sainers, and welcome to the round 7 preview. It's GWS against St Kilda. It's going to be an interesting one. It's been an interesting week with some good and bad news. So let's start with that. So I guess the bad news is that Jack Stephen is out this week and indefinitely again due to mental illness. He obviously in pre-season he announced that, and the club gave him some leave, and it looks like it's now risen again, and he's out indefinitely. So it's really bad news. In terms of good news, Geary's back at training, which is awesome. We saw a gruesome photo of his training injury today that came out through the media, and you can see his thigh just cut open, and that's just unreal to see, and just how serious the injury was. The good news, on the other hand, is Jack Loney, obviously out for about 4 to 6 weeks, but the injury wasn't as bad as they thought it was, which is great. And the other news, with our lineup, is that Jonathan Marsh, who originally played for Collingwood, took some time off for a couple of years due to his own mental demons. He's going to debut on the weekend, and he's a huge unit. I think he's probably going to play forward. It's going to be very interesting to see how he goes. He's a seriously fast athlete for such a big guy. He's like 6'5", 6'6". So I can see him being a pinch hit in the ruck. He can go back, he can go forward. He's very versatile, so I think he gives us a lot. The only question mark going into this game for him is his fitness and if he can run out of game, because apparently, when he played for Sandy a couple of weeks recently, he looked good for a quarter or two, but he just kind of fell away. But hopefully playing deep, he can just kind of hover around the square and not exert himself too much and give us a really good marking forward. And it's going to be interesting to see how our forward line goes with the 3 talls. So we've got Membry, Bruce and Marsh, which is awesome. In terms of the other ends, Darragh Joyce returns, so he comes in. Nathan Brown omitted, despite having a really good season, although last week wasn't his best game. So Darragh Joyce comes in, gives us a bit more flexibility in the back half. Rowan Marshall, as we wanted, back in, which is awesome, which means obviously paves the way for Billy Longer being dropped. Obviously Jack Loney is out as well because of his injury, and in his place, Hunter Clark. So a bit more midfield depth. I was hoping that GWS were going to be missing Caniglio and Whitfield. It looks like Caniglio's pulled up. So he's listed in the midfield. I think, yes, on the wing, half-forward flank. But Lachie Whitfield is out. So that's a big one for us because in, I think, 4 of their 6 games this season, he's polled votes, coaches' votes. He's gotten the most possessions. So it's a big out for them. And they've brought in their captain, Phil Davis. Or their vice-captain, Phil Davis, has come in as well. So they've got fairly strong lineup. Obviously, Jeremy Cameron's the big worry there. He's kicked 3 or more goals in every game this season. So if there's any chance of us winning, he needs to be kept quiet. And I think that's the main reason why we saw someone like Nathan Brown dropped, is that he will not stand a chance against the mobile forwards of the GWS forward line, in terms of Cameron, in terms of Himmelberg. They've got Toby Green there, Zach Williams. They've got some serious firepower, and it's going to be very hard for us. But generally speaking, in recent games, we've matched up fairly well against them. Last year we drew to them, and we lost by about 25 points in the away fixture. Previous to that, we beat them by 23, and we were within 5-6 goals either way of the other 2 games going back to 2015. So it's been fairly good. For some reason, they always seem to play slightly poor against us compared to when they play other teams. And I have no doubt that if we can bring our best tackling pressure, which wasn't there last week, so hopefully that's more of an aberration, last week's performance, it can be kind of a reminder to be like, look what happens when you don't try, and when you don't put on pressure, when you don't chase, when you don't play the Saints footy that they did in the first 5 weeks, because then teams run all over you. So hopefully that is a warning as to don't do that against GWS, because they're probably one of the most skilled teams in the AFL. So they will cut any team open if there's no pressure. They beat Geelong in Geelong, and Geelong have been phenomenal this season. So that says how good this team is going. But I don't think we should go there thinking, we're just going there to fill the numbers. Let's go there and let's give them a game that's going to hurt them, and a game that's going to surprise a lot of people in the AFL, because a lot of people, again, think that we're just we're going there and we're not going to do anything. So the best thing for us is we're back to being underdogs. We're back to being, backs against the wall, away from home. So no pressure in front of home fans like there was last week, that expectation. Now we just go there and we fucking try. And that's what I want. In terms of the AFL and what they're thinking of the game, let's go through what they think. They think what this means for St Kilda in terms of the game is a win over the Giants in Canberra would give the Saints their first big scalp of the year and go a long way towards silencing the doubters who don't rate them as finals contenders. 100%. Although I would have said that Hawks and Melbourne, top 4 teams from last season, probably scalps, but on current form they're not. How St Kilda wins. This is how the AFL thinks will win. Midfield speed and quick ball movement can hurt GWS at times, and the Saints have plenty of speedy on-ballers who will enjoy the deck in Canberra. Yes, we have speedy on-ballers. We just need them to get hold of the ball. Last week, Gresham was quiet, Billings was quiet. The only person that really got a lot of possessions was Ross and Stephen's out. So we need players like the Hunter Clarks, like the Akers, those sort of guys, the Greshams, the Steeles to really pick up their game. Steele was still good in the pressure stats last week, but not so much in getting the ball. So I hope that even though he's probably going to take on a Caniglio or someone like that, I don't want him to forget to try and get the ball. We don't want to be too defensive minded, because I think that's what Richo said last week, is that he came out in his press conference and he said, maybe we were a bit too reluctant. We didn't pull the trigger like we did in the first quarter, and look what happened. We were very good in the first quarter, bar finishing the chance at the end. We kicked 3 goals, 6 goals, 3, and the game goes a different direction. So I think that, that might be a message going into this week, is that yes, GWS are very good, but let's not be too worried about what they're going to do, and let's go there and take them on and make them chase the game and see where that takes us. Because I think that's when we're at our best, is when we don't focus too much on the opposition. We give them respect, and defensively we're strong, but we don't let the defense affect going forward, because, GWS have got one of the best attacks in the league. Their defence has leaked more goals than ours, so their defence isn't that good. I think it's going to be a very interesting game to see how we go, and I'm super excited for it. We've got a huge 3 weeks. We've got GWS, we've got West Coast, and then Collingwood, and then Carlton, I think, after that. So it's not like that's going to be any easier in terms of performance. But one game last week, we had an off week. It was 29 points, but I think it's a new week, and I think that we've got a team where they don't want to have a bad performance and have that be the trend. They want to keep responding, and I think that against GWS, their Achilles heel is probably the outside. They've got great outside players, but they're not that disciplined in terms of defense. So if you're clean enough with the ball, which not many teams are better than GWS, this is why they get away with it, but if you're clean enough with the ball and you can cut through them piece by piece, you'll be fine. Let's go through some of these comments before I keep going. Caroline says, so Bruce is fit to play. Correct, Bruce is fit to play. The club said during the week that him actually playing on the weekend kind of loosened up his body, and he's felt a lot better this week because of him playing. He didn't feel well on game day on Saturday, but post-game he actually recovered well and his body felt better for it, and he's fine to play. David Waite says, I would honestly be surprised if the Saints make the top 8 considering all the injuries we have and the other players unable to play due to different circumstances. I agree with you there. It would take a crazy effort to do that, but I think that we need to remember that players that are coming in are players that didn't probably think they were getting a chance this early, and they want to take it before anyone can take that chance away from them. So I think that competition for spots is fairly strong still, because we still do have a lot of players performing in the VFL that are playing well, in terms of Dunstan, Nick Hine, Robbie Young, all of these guys waiting for their chance. So a lot of our players still are on edge, and they still need to give 150% every week, otherwise they could be dropped. Let's keep going. Ash says, didn't say he was superstar, just said I didn't think he played that bad to be dropped. I think that's in terms of Nathan Brown. Good to see Marsh get a crack. Emmett says, I reckon Marshall will go on to Cameron. I don't know. I mean, we dropped Brown and we brought in Joyce. So for me, I'm thinking that Joyce will play in defence. It just depends on if we take Battle and put him in the forward line, and then Marsh goes back. But I think I'd prefer Marsh in the forward line. I think he looks like a bloke that can just take a couple of grabs, kick some goals. But in terms of the back line, I think that, the GWS attackers are just too good at the moment for a guy that's playing his first game in about 3 years. Longer is a dud. Marcus says, I reckon we just don't have a good enough list, plus some of outstanding players are out injured. I think our list is good enough. I think we still lack that A grade that a lot of teams have, but I think, if we get Stephen and Hanbury, Ross go to that next level, Gresham, Billings, Carlisle comes back, Bruce, Membry, these sort of guys, Max King can come in and do a job. I think then you can start to see a lot of B plus and potentially a lot of A grade players there, but I've never been a big fan of this A, B, C, D grade sort of shit. It's just go out, and if you give more effort than your opposition, you're in the game and you can win. Look at what the Bulldogs did 2 years ago. Look at what Richmond did, So they came out of nowhere with a list that was probably deemed the same as ours in terms of, they didn't have that many A graders. Bulldogs, they only had Bontempelli. In terms of Richmond, probably they had 3. They had Jack Rewald, 4. They had Rance, Jack Rewald, Cochin, Dusty. That was it. So I don't think we've got 4, but I think we can build to that standard, and that doesn't mean we can't make finals. Vince says, Joyce on Cameron, am worried he's surprised no Robert Young. I think his time will come, but I think just because of the certain injuries that we've had this week, Loney and then particularly Stephen coming out, we didn't want to make too many changes. We want to keep a fairly settled lineup, and against GWS you need to do that, and so I can understand why they didn't want to force Robbie Young in. Bailey Rice, what does he need to do? I think it's just in terms of who we're playing structurally. Stuart Smith says if we play like we did the first 3 to 4 weeks, Saints can win, but Saints by 4 to 5 goals. Mike says, what in the hell does Nick Hind have to do? I think they're just, I'm not a coach, so it's tricky to say. For so many years, Blake Acres was dominating VFL level, and everyone was like, why isn't he playing? But the coaches always knew he just didn't have that defensive game, and he always wanted to get the ball, but he wasn't willing to chase and tackle. Now we can see that he's willing to do that. He's chasing, he's tackling, he's harassing. That's part of the Saints footy DNA now. If you don't do that, you don't get into the team. So potentially Nick Hind isn't as defensive as they want him to be. Obviously, he's got the attacking assets. He's fast. He's a good kick. He loves moving forward. He looks good moving forward with the ball. But in terms of defense, maybe he needs to improve on the two-way running, because that's the big thing now is two-way. You have to go forward. You have to be willing to go back. And when you look at our new defensive structure, it involves going forward, but also quickly getting back when you turn the ball over and setting up before they can go forward. And if players can't do that, like a few players didn't do last week against Adelaide, our whole zonal defence breaks down. You need everyone to be committed like they have been for most of this season. And if 1 or 2 cogs are out of whack, teams can cut through. And if they're good kicking teams like Adelaide's and the GWS's, they will hurt you. This week is no exception with GWS, who are a top 4 team of the last 4 years, prelim finalists. Stupid to not have won a flag by now with the list that they have, but they're still very good, and we need to be really switched on to be in this game. And I'm expecting a response. That's what I'm hoping for, is a big response from last week's performance and to back ourselves in to take them on. Daniel says, missed the big row last week. Good to see him back. Dave also says, don't think you'll see all the names you just mentioned play together this year. I know it's a bit sad to say, but if we can get a couple on the park, that would be great. David says, very impressed with Matty Parker. Marker the nominee. He was our best player last week, so awesome to see him stay in. It's a given now. He's kind of the barometer almost of our team. If he's on, we're doing all right, so he can get the players up and about, and it's just a great story from where he's come from, and it just gets better. He gets better and better every week. Matt said, would like Hind for Mackenzie, but happy with the team. Bo says, would like Robbie Young for Kent. Yeah, Kent's the interesting one. He had a very poor game last week, but it seems like the coaches this year, I don't know if it's because of Rats and Lady and all these sort of guys coming in and everything, but I feel like last year we would have dropped him like that. But in terms of this year, we're giving players a lot of chances and to back themselves, to say, we know you're better than that, and we want you to prove it this weekend. They're not going to say, oh, you had one bad game after playing amazingly against Melbourne and we're going to drop you. We're going to say last week was a bad week, but we expect you to be switched on this week. So if he doesn't perform this week, I can see him being dropped next week. So there's a lot riding on this for a lot of players, but I'm backing them in to have a really good game. Matthew says, where are Robbie Young and Nick Hind? Sandy, unfortunately, for now. Daniel says, has Battle found his place at centre-half back? Yes, it was his best game by far last week in terms of even being forward or back. His best game as a player for St Kilda. He has that advantage like a Darcy Moore. He reminds me of a Darcy Moore, in that Darcy Moore, playing forward, knows how forwards think. He knows the runs. He knows when to... in terms of how he defends, he's almost playing like a forward. There were a few times there last week where Battle actually got to the ball first because he pushed off and almost like he was leading to the ball because he knew where the fall was and he marked it. And a lot of defenders naturally will go behind the attacker to punch, whereas he was reading the ball before it even came off the boot, pushed his opponent, he's forward and got the ball and rebounded us quickly with a good kick into the 50. So I think he has that advantage, and a lot of defenders don't have that as just a natural instinct, and he gets it because he's had experience playing forward. So I think he's a great backman. He's fairly fast. He's a good kick. He reads the play excellently because of that craft he learnt playing as a forward. But he also gives us that flexibility. If we need someone to go forward, we can put him there. And if we're struggling in defense, obviously he goes back and plays there. So I think that's awesome. Cooper says Hind and Brown in, Long and Joyce out. Long, interesting. Elliot James says Marsh is listed in the forward pocket, I think. Anthony says, was talk of Jack Billings being a dark horse for the Brownlow, probably 2 to 3 best on ground so far this season. What are your thoughts? Yeah, I mean, he's been excellent in all games. I definitely think in terms of, the Melbourne and Hawthorn wins, I think he'd be up there in terms of polls. The Essendon game, I probably would think he's up there. I think in most of our wins, he'd poll some votes. So the fact that we've got 4 wins out of 6 so far means that a few Saners are going to poll in terms of, the accumulators in Seb Ross, Jack Steele, Jack Loney, probably against the Hawks when he kicked 3 goals 5. So there's a lot of players there that could take some votes. But Billings has had an exceptional season and hopefully he resigns soon. I think I might leave it there, guys. Comment what you think the result's going to be. I'm going into this with full optimism. It's too early in the season to go into games expecting a certain performance, because so far this season we've gone into 6 games and we've performed for 4.5 of them, I would say, 4.5 of them. Or maybe more than that, maybe 5 games, because I think the Perth game against Freo was relatively good and Freo beat GWS, so there's no reason why we can't go there and cause an upset. So I'm backing us in. I think we can go there and cause a massive upset and get our season back on track. If we can get away with that, come back and play West Coast and be 5-2, awesome, guys. So back the team in, watch the game, go to the game. I was thinking of flying there, but it's fucking expensive, so I'll leave it at that. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching. Please comment, like, let me know what you think of the ins and outs, and I'll see you post-game on Saturday. Go Saints.